the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome, everyone, to the Radnor Board of Commissioners meeting for April 22nd, 2013. We're going to go ahead and start our meeting off with public participation for anyone who can't stay through the meeting. Is there any public comment to start out with? Hello.
Hello. My name is Michelle Skolnick. I live in Wayne, and I'm here to announce the upcoming blood drive that my family is running in memory of my mother. The Carol H. Axelrod Memorial Blood Drive will take place on Tuesday, May 14th. That's the Tuesday after Mother's Day, from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. right here in this room. The events last week in Boston really served to underscore the importance of maintaining a stable blood supply, and we are eager to do our part to ensure that blood transfusions and blood products are available to anyone who may need them at any time. This is the second year we're holding this event in Radnor. We had great community support last year. This year our goal is to collect 100 units. We also wanted to have the blood drive give back to the local community in some way. So for every unit of blood that's collected on May 14th, our family will make a donation to the Radnor ABC program. If we can surpass our collection total of 81 units from last year, we'll double our donation. And if we can reach that 100 unit number, we will triple our donation. Anyone who would like to make an appointment can do so by visiting our website, which is chabblooddrive.org, or call 1-800-RED-CROSS. And there will also be gift bags and good food and some other surprises for donors. So we're looking forward to a great turnout. I've given Jennifer DeStefano some flyers, so if anyone would like one, they can pick one up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you to your assistant.
Oh. Thank you.
All right, is there any other public comment? Next, I'd like to announce that we had an executive session immediately preceding this meeting on April 22nd, 2013, and we discussed matters of personnel, litigation, and real estate. Next, we have some appointments to some of our boards and commissions, and John Fisher, would you handle that?
Thank you. I'll move to appoint Paul Spector to the Citizens Communication Council and Randy Hope to the Shade Tree Commission.
Second.
Any commissioner comment, or staff comment, or public comment? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes 7-0. Next, I would like to invite up some representatives from the Wayne Business Association to give us an update on some of the events happening in Wayne. Hello, Diane.
Hi. Diane Jorley, President of the Wayne Business Association. And first, I'd like to say, wow. The Wheels of Wayne was a phenomenal event yesterday, and this was the first Township organized and run event on North Wayne Avenue, and I have to say it was a huge success. I've been involved with these events for 20 years, and this event was phenomenal. Thank you very much. Just to keep you up to speed with some of the things that we have planned for the rest of the year, we're going to be doing the Wheels of Wayne. Can I get the, I'm sorry, I didn't give them a preparation here. The cleanup day in Wayne. Can I get that or no? It's too late to get the overhead
Come on.
going?
Yeah, you should lay right on top of the badges. They might be able to pick it up.
On top of the badges? Oh, there we go. Okay. This is Wayne Cleanup Day, which is Saturday, May 18th, in preparation for the Memorial Day Parade. And then we have the Mainline Jazz and Food Festival, which is Saturday, June 8th. And that's going to be another event on North Wayne Avenue. And then we have the Radnor Fall Festival, September 15th, and that's our 21st year doing this event. And again, we work very hard to bring commerce into Wayne, much like you folks helped us do yesterday. And then we have the Wayne Hotel's Old-Fashioned Christmas Celebration, the first Friday and Saturday in December. And we just wanted to make the commissioners and the township aware of all of our events that we've got planned for this year. And thank you again for all of your support.
Well, thank you. There's some really great events coming up, and yesterday was fabulous. And thank you for your participation in it as well.
Thank you. Thanks.
All right, next, can we have a motion to accept our departmental reports?
I'll
So
move
moved.
to accept the departmental reports.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded. Do we have any commissioner comment?
Bill, I sent you an email around the title of one of the reports. Was I accurate in my understanding that it's not the full year actual, it's the year-to-date actual?
Yes, yeah, that is correct. And the online version is being amended as we speak right now.
Okay. Okay. And then the second question, I think I understand. I just want to be clear. Of the 1.5 million, it's simply a timing difference. They paid in January. We kind of anticipated it in the month of May. So until we get to May, we'll see a favorable year-to-date variance. When we get to May, it washes out.
That's one scenario. We don't know.
You don't know
until
yet.
they file their full 12 return. We won't know if a variance exists or not.
So until they file the return, you're not willing to commit to it being a favorable variance, is what you're telling me.
Yes, sir.
Okay, got it.
I just want to highlight, I promised I would highlight each month some of the activity. So for the month of March, I will just pick out a few here. Community Development handled 183 permits. The Recreation and Community Programming Department, in addition to doing a really great job with Wheels of Wayne yesterday, they also have increased our sponsorship of programs in the township and have met and exceeded last year's entire contributions. So this idea of public-private partnerships is working, and I'm really appreciative to Tammy Cohen and the staff that are involved in that process. And just to finalize my comments, the police department handled 1,752 calls last month. So I look forward to hiring some more officers tonight to alleviate the stress on the existing officers, and I want to thank all of the officers present for the hard work they've been doing for the last couple of years. We all appreciate it. The residents appreciate it. I get nothing but positive comments on our police department all the time now, so I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Okay, any other any other commissioner comment? Any staff comment or public comment? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes 7-0. Next, we move on to our committee reports, and we'll begin with Public Works and Engineering with Commissioner Jim Higgins.
The first item is Resolution 2013-60, authorization of payment of $7,600 for repairs to the township's front-end loader. Is Steve Norsini with us tonight?
No, I can handle that, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you.
What this is one of our loaders needed repairs due to heavy oil leaking that had taken place. The authorized dealer, which is Penn Jersey Incorporated, disassembled this, and as they disassembled it, found more and more items that were wrong that need to be repaired. We want to bring this in front of the Board of Commissioners for your approval.
Bob, there's a mismatch between the resolution and the agenda. What's the right number? Resolution says 7,199. The agenda says 7,600.
It's $7,199.
Thank you.
I'll move the introduction of the passage of the resolution with the corrected number in place.
Second?
Any commissioner comment? Any staff comment? Any public comment? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? It passes 7-0. And we will move right along to Personnel and Administration with Commissioner John Fisher.
All right, first up, I'll move to approve Resolution 2013-59. This is approving the Radnor Memorial Day Parade.
Second?
Any commissioner comments on this item? Any staff comment? Any public comment? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Passes 7-0.
I'll move to approve the 2013 to 2018 FOP Collective Bargaining Agreement.
Second?
Any commissioner comment on this?
I'll make some brief comments. I think about a year ago, we started looking at the financial issues associated with hiring more officers and getting to terms with the staffing levels in the police department. And the police officers and the township have worked really hard at looking at this contract over the last year. I want to thank all of them because you helped us get to a place where we could hire more officers and also maintain all of the existing promises to existing officers, but hire new officers under favorable terms to all. And I think what we're looking at here is a contract that is really fair and really decent. So I want to thank both sides for their work on this. I want to thank all staff that were involved in this, including CARFAC, who helped identify the true cost of hiring officers, and that allowed us and the township to work hard at finding a funding strategy to fund new hires. I won't highlight everything in the contract, but we're giving officers 2.5% increase in 2013 and then 2.75% increases in 2014 through 2018. The officers have agreed to give a 7% contribution on the medical costs and also 5% contribution on pension. So going back to the partnership, we know that all townships are suffering and having a difficult time financially. The officers have come to the table and helped us meet the obligations and afford to hire new officers. So thank you to all of you for that. So in essence, we've been able to reduce some of our OPEB and pension costs through this effort, and that hopefully will allow us to not only hire officers tonight, but hire officers in the future. So with that, if there's, I don't know if Bob, do you want to make any comments about the contract?
Sure, just want to thank the FOP for their assistance on working through the agreement, approximately 9 months to be able to hammer out this agreement. And I want to thank them for their respectful negotiations. I'm sure there were a lot of adjectives attached to my name after those meetings and that, and I'm sure it went both ways. But really, I think it was very respectful, and I think the officers really understood kind of where the township was at here. But also, during this time period where the staff had shrunk, that the officers had stepped up in a big way to make sure that we were providing the excellent service to the officers. It's also good at this point that the hard work and effort of our Civil Service Commission as well, that they've put a lot of time and effort in to put the list together and came up with some very good candidates for us here. And I want to say to them, commend them for all their hard work and efforts. We have some excellent candidates tonight in front of us that I think the township would be very proud of for their efforts. On the financial side there, Bill, I'll let you step through a couple of the items here, but our CARFAC, as you had mentioned, Commissioner, did an excellent job putting a lot of this information together and was very helpful for us, I think, putting a lot of this information and starting to put a roadmap together for us to address a lot of the issues, and they were a big part of this as well. I want to thank them for all their hard work and efforts.
Yeah, real briefly, a couple questions were raised at the last meeting with regard to the hiring of the 8 individuals that we'll see tonight, along with the approval of this agreement, is how it fits into the 2013 budget. We've taken a look at that, and there's a variance of roughly $110,000 that we'll need to find from within current appropriations. That's something that we're working on now, and we feel confident that we'll be able to do that. And once we identify the specific line items from within the police and other areas of the general fund budget, we'll bring it back to the board and to the public and give that presentation as well. But at this point, there's not a lot of concern to find that dollar amount. And I'd like to thank the police administration, the superintendent, lieutenants, as well as Corporal Gallagher, and working with us on coming up with those numbers and working on within their budgets and modifying what they need to do to make sure that they're able to remain budgetarily sound at the same time hire the officers tonight. So real briefly, it's in the packets. I want to touch on the cost comparison on the officers. Again, this goes back to the work that CARFAC did last summer in establishing the true cost for not just the officers. They did it for all township employees. It's in their report, which is out on the township's website. And in doing negotiations and sitting down and figuring out what some of the big ticket levers were that needed to be addressed, we used their information in their report. And you could see it when you compare the 2 bar charts in terms of the long-term obligations and the funding on a per officer basis, where those different areas are at. So I would like to thank the CARFAC as well for their work in helping us out and helping identify those areas and working with us on developing or putting together what is in market with regard to our neighbors and what their compensation and benefit levels are, making sure that Radnor's right in that same area. Still a great place to work, but at the same time in market with what we're paying out versus our neighbors.
Thank you, Bill. And I just want to pile on a tiny bit with the gratitude, because there are 2 groups in particular I really want to shout out to, and that is, again, CARFAC Really, it was immensely helpful in this process to have the hard work that they put forward. It was a lot of work researching all of the region and all of the different departments and what the market is. None of us really had a strong understanding of that, and it helped everyone on every side of this issue really come together and come up with a sustainable future for us. And that work, I mean, we wouldn't be here without that work having been done so thoroughly. The other group of people I'd really like to shout out to, in addition to all of those already mentioned, is our current officers. During this prolonged period of negotiation, we've been pretty short, very short, and our officers have really stepped up to the plate, been incredibly professional, top-notch service. We never received any increase in complaints. The service they provided was the utmost of professionalism that they always provide, even though they were asked to work far harder and far longer than they had in the past during this period. And we all appreciate it. Our community appreciates it. And hopefully, finally, that's over now after tonight. So thank you again. Are there any other comments from our commissioners? Okay, staff have any more comments? Any public comment? All right, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? It passes 7-0.
Next up, I'll invite Bill Colorillo to the podium, Superintendent of Police, to swear in the Radnor Township police officers.
Madam President and other commissioners, I'm respectfully requesting your approval for the hiring and the eventual swearing in of 8 police officers. As you know, they went through a rigorous hiring process, starting out with a written examination, followed by an oral examination, physical agility test, psychiatric evaluation, and a physical including a drug test. But probably the most grueling test that they went through is a personal interview with myself, the township manager, and the HR director. And we're truly getting the best of the best. And the officers we're asking for you to approve the hiring and swearing in are Leo Vogel, Nicholas Lay, Michael Cook, Raymond Rodden, Catherine Reardon, Francis Hayden, Stephen Solinsky, and Thomas Matajazic. And if you approve, I will have the colors escort the judge and the candidates in.
So move.
Second?
All right, let's go ahead and take the vote, and then we'll carry on with the swearing in. Is there any other commissioner comment? Any staff comment? Any public comment? All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Passes 7-0.
I ask everyone to please rise for the presentation of the colors. It is now my pleasure to introduce for the swearing in the Honorable Judge Ann Osborne.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight, Radnor is once again honored and blessed with marvelous candidates for inclusion among the ranks of those who protect us and care for us so well here in Radnor Township. 8 candidates are presented for administration of the oath of office. I thank Superintendent Colorillo and Lieutenant Block for inviting me here. And I would begin by asking each to introduce him or herself to you. Sir?
Ray Rodden, Leo Vogel, Stephen Solinsky, Francis Hayden, Michael Cook, Nick Rodden.
Would each of the candidates please raise your right hand? Repeat after me. I do solemnly swear that I am a citizen of the United States of America, that I will uphold the Constitution and laws of the United States and of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, that I will faithfully perform all the duties of a police officer of Radnor Township and obey all orders from my superior officers to the best of my ability. Congratulations.
Each new Radnor police officer was asked to select a family member or a close friend to have the honor of pinning the badge on their loved one. So we're asking you now to come forward.
Best wishes, Steve. 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 These guys are straight.
This is a lot bigger of a turnout than we expected, but the family members are welcome back into my office for some light refreshments. So at this point now, we are going to ask everyone to remain standing to retire the colors, and the new officers will follow. Thank you.
Well, thank you to all the family members for coming. We look forward to all of these officers having a successful career at Radnor. So thank you for coming and enjoy the refreshments. And thank you to Judge Osborne as well, wherever you are, for joining us tonight.
She's already at the refreshment.
Right.
Now we get to do the...
If everyone could just go outside, we'd appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and keep moving. Nothing on the agenda is as exciting as that was, but we'll plod along here. Next, we are going to move on to community development with Commissioner Don Curley.
I move the introduction of ordinance 201, well, excuse, doesn't have a number yet, but amending Chapter 115, Animals, the Code of Radnor Township by providing new regulations and revisions to the code upon recommendation of the Township Board of Health.
Second.
All right, do we have any commissioner comments on this?
I'll make a few brief comments. I'm glad this ordinance is here. I'm not going to support it in its current form because I think we need to not only address some of the items that are addressed in the version from the Board of Health, but also look at it from a more holistic standpoint and to address some of the real issues that face the township, the state, and the country. You can't hear me? Okay. That's okay. I'll turn it up. I think my mic's down a little bit. So I don't support it in the current form. What I would like to do is recommend either some amendments to it or recommend that it go either back to staff for comment before we introduce. I had a similar version that we brought to staff about a year ago, and at that time, staff's comments wouldn't allow me to bring it forward because they were not completely in agreement with the wording, the enforcement, and there are issues. But I'll try to speak to one or two of the topics in particular. So let's be clear that the Board of Health, their goal was to make amendments to an existing ordinance that handled mostly dogs and to treat cats the same way. And the goal there was to improve public health. And I think they did some of that. I think some of that is in here. There's no doubt. But in some ways, there seems to be a disconnect between the goals and desires of the Board of Health and then some of the realities of what's going on in the community and in the country in terms of feral cats and what they call feral cat caregivers. So I'll just briefly summarize it, but I see a group of folks here that probably won't want to get up and speak to this with a little more authority, a little more understanding than I will be able to do here. But in essence, the way the ordinance reads for me, the ordinance identifies anyone who feeds a feral cat as the de facto owner of that cat. And as a consequence of being an owner of that cat under this ordinance, they're now subject to the rules and regulations of the ordinance. And in many ways, it's impractical for them to, in fact, deliver on some of the requirements of the ordinance. Feral cats, unlike domestic cats, are not able to be handled by humans. They're not able to be approached by humans. They generally don't want to be around people. And as a consequence of that, it makes it very difficult for anyone, whether they're experienced or inexperienced, to actually take a cat, a feral cat, take it to a clinic, have it spayed, neutered, vaccinated, and then even try to re-domesticate that cat. So in essence, we have a situation where there's a very large community of feral cat caregivers in the country that are doing a very good job without any authorization, without any ordinance, or without any help from the governments to take care of these animals. And what we're hoping to do is, in my opinion, is partner with them so that their activities can continue and that we can actually help be part of that solution. So what I would recommend is that we maybe keep, instead of introducing the form as it is tonight, maybe have this go back to staff, maybe have some of the concerns of those communities interact with staff and come up with a draft that would make more sense in terms of enforcement, make more sense of encouraging the good behavior that we want, which is caring for animals, discouraging the bad behavior, which may be feeding feral cats and not getting them spayed, neutered, vaccinated to improve public health and safety. But as the ordinance is written now, if you take the pieces that are in place, in essence, if someone feeds a feral cat, they then therefore become its owner. Even if that animal is not on their property, they are, according to this ordinance, become the owner of that animal. And then under the ordinance, they're required to have that animal vaccinated, but we don't provide a method for them to vaccinate that animal or a process. And if they're caught feeding an animal that hasn't been vaccinated, they're in violation of the ordinance, subject to fines between $300 and $1,000. And if they're unable to pay those fines, they're subject to imprisonment. I think some of these elements need to be there, but maybe we need to clarify what constitutes ownership. The only example I can give you right now is that my wife and I feed birds on our lawn. We feed thousands of birds a week. Do we now own the birds that have fed from our feeder? What stops the board from passing an ordinance requiring us to now license and vaccinate those animals or do something for those animals? I'm not going to be able to catch those birds, no more so than someone could catch a feral cat. So that's my example. I like the work that the Board of Health did. I think they're doing what they need to do to ensure public safety, but that's why the Board of Health advises the Board of Commissioners, is so that we can apply some rational enforcement measures to make sure that any ordinance that we pass can in fact be enforced and achieves the intended goal. The intended goal here is to improve public safety. I personally hope the intended goal is to preserve animal welfare and health and avoid the senseless killing of animals and the senseless fining and potential imprisonment of people that care for animals. So that's my comment. I don't think I need to, we're not passing this ordinance tonight. We're introducing this ordinance possibly tonight. But I personally think that after working on this for many months over the last couple of years and looking at this, I think there's a solution in hand. I think we've implemented some of those elements already, and we're actually working with the community that cares for animals. But I would like to make sure it becomes official. Any actions that we take, and I'll give you one example. If we can accept the fact that feral cats are a reality and that they do exist and that they're not necessarily going to go away, then maybe as a township we have to accept some of the responsibility of caring for those animals in a humane way. Not just exterminating the animals, not just paying someone else to exterminate the animals, but to actually do something to care for those animals. And if if we pass an ordinance like this, I believe a companion to this ordinance should be some line item of funding, albeit small, to help carry the cost of doing that work. As I understand it now, many of the feral cat caregivers in the township, in the region, and in the United States pay for most of this work out of their own pockets. So they'll take their hard-earned money and they'll address a public health issue that all of us really own with their own money. So what I'd like to see is this township take a very small step and put a little bit of funding, a few $1,000s a year would probably cover it, to help fund this activity. And we can all debate, whether or not we should be doing that or not, but the reality is many states, counties across the country fully recognize that feral cats exist and that the way to eliminate feral cats is not extermination. It's TNR programs, trap, neuter, release, and that those programs are in fact effective. They're being used in many states, the state of Oregon, the state of Washington. Many states that have very large wooded areas use these programs with great success. We are not really a large wooded area with a very large problem. The feral cat population in Radnor is probably very small compared to these other places. Now, just one other caveat. The feral cat problem is mostly due to people abandoning animals. Someone who owns a cat decides they no longer want to have that cat, and they don't have the heart to take it to the kill shelter or to a donation shelter, they simply let it outside, and they hope that it does well on its own. That's not humane, it's improper, it's wrong. This ordinance needs to address that issue as well. So, for instance, there should be a penalty to fine people that are caught releasing an animal. We're finding someone who wants to take care of an animal, but we're not going to find the person that throws an animal out on its own. That makes no sense to me. So this is the direction, in my mind and in my heart, where this ordinance needs to end up. We may not get there all at once, but in the end, I really think if we're going to solve a problem or address the problem adequately, we need to do a little bit of each and every one of those steps. That's my comment.
Thank you, John.
I have one question. Peter Nelson, do we really need the line about default payment and jail time?
In the penalty section?
Yes.
We don't have to do jail time. In fact, putting the jail time in there gives the accused, rights just like any other criminal accused, and actually makes it a little more difficult to prosecute.
So if we took it out, it would not weaken what we're trying to do?
No, then it would just be a financial penalty.
Yeah.
Don,
So-
that's in the current ordinance. That's not being changed tonight.
Yeah, but we could still take it out.
We can,
It
but
just
it's-
seems a little extreme to me. So, John Fisher, that would give you some solace, right?
Well, and it would also make it, for instance, I would imagine there may be a conflict between us. I don't think we can determine that someone goes to jail. I think only a prosecutor, judge, and jury does that. I don't think on this level we can determine that
So
someone
no
goes to
issue
jail.
from the solicitor if we introduce this without that provision?
No.
All right, well, I'll move that we strike the line in the penalty section that says, in default of payment of such fine and cost, such person shall be imprisoned in the county jail for a term not exceeding 30 days.
Second.
Okay,
Okay.
I'd like to move for one amendment as
Well,
it
wait,
stands.
Let's do
finish
one
this
amendment
up.
at a time.
First of all, the person isn't going to jail because they fed cats or something of that nature. They're going to jail because they didn't pay the fines. So there's no difference there than almost all of our ordinances. People have an obligation to pay the fines. We have the right to make laws that they're supposed to follow.
Yeah, but, if you don't pay your sewer rent, you don't go to jail. We shouldn't make laws. that
Sewer
people
rent
go-
is
We should
entirely
make, we
different.
shouldn't make laws where people go to jail
Well,
because
then
they
I
don't pay a
think
fine.
I would like to make a recommendation that we purge our entire code of that phrase.
Well, we don't need to deal with that tonight.
After this, we may have to, but it's a good
Right.
point.
All right, let's go ahead and deal with the amendment first, which is just the removal of the section taking out, section dealing with jail time. Do we have any other commissioner comment on just that issue?
Well, I got a question for Peter. So, okay, they say, I got fined, I'm not paying. What happens? What's the consequences of not paying?
You take them to district
Take that
justice.
out.
Well, it's usually up to district court to try to collect a fine. And if they don't pay the fine, they can, the district court can issue a bench warrant against them and go after them that way. If the township actually gets a judgment against them directly, we can, file that judgment as a lien against their property and collect the fine that way.
So there is a vehicle for getting the money.
Yes, yes.
Okay, any other commissioner comment or questions about just that aspect of it? Any staff comment? Any public comment about just the jail time aspect? All right, I'm going to call that amendment to vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Opposed?
So that passes 6-1 with Commissioner Nagel opposing. Now, let's continue discussion of the underlying introduction. I have just some brief comments. I want to repeat and reiterate for everyone that this is just an introduction that we're talking about. We are not passing any ordinance tonight. And I also, in my opinion, what we have in front of us today is vastly different than what came out of the Board of Health a year or 2 years ago after they worked on it for a year and a half. And it's not a grand departure from what we have on the books already. It's not a grand departure at all. There is no feeding ban in this ordinance. There is no leash requirement in this ordinance. There is no licensing requirement in this ordinance for cats, all of this. So it is not a sweeping new regulation regulating our cats. The one difference, the primary difference between what we have on the books now and what this is while it does not prohibit people from feeding feral cats, it puts the responsibility on people who decide that they would like to regularly feed feral cats, that with that decision of caretaking for feral cats comes the responsibility of vaccinating them. And that is the responsibility of ownership. And in my opinion, I don't think that's asking, if someone is moved and passionate enough to keep these animals fed, then they should be moved and passionate enough to get them vaccinated. And I think that that's perfectly fair. As far as the trap, neuter, and release program, there is nothing in this ordinance that would preclude this type of program. Any group that is interested in running that in Radnor can come in Radnor, and it comports with this ordinance. I personally do not think we are in a position in Radnor to have the staff and administration and the mechanism and enforcement to run a program like that right now. However, if there are private groups who are privately funded who feel that this passionately moved to do that, this ordinance would allow them to do that. So that could happen. So I am supporting this as it's drafted and now amended. I don't think this is some grand departure of what we are dealing with now, and I think the requirements in it are fair.
Okay, I'd like to introduce one amendment, and first I'll explain the rationale, and then I'll recommend the amendment. So in the definition section, we define owner as includes any person having a right of property in any animal, and any person who keeps, harbors, or regularly feeds an animal, or has it in its care, or allows it to remain on or about any premises occupied by him. And then later in section 115-9, we state any feeding of feral cats, a domesticated cat that has returned to the wild, or the offspring of such cat is to be discouraged. I'm fine with that. The second sentence, regular feeding of feral cats constitutes ownership, which is the resultant responsibilities as outlined in this chapter, with its resultant responsibilities. I get the intent of the statement. I understand what we're trying to do here. We're trying to have those who feed feral cats also assume responsibility for vaccination of feral cats. And I also support that activity. I think that's good to do. But I find it difficult to enact an ordinance that constitutes ownership of an animal by virtue of feeding. We have folks that are feeding ducks, pigeons, and other birds and other animals in our public parks. It doesn't constitute ownership. Now, the difference is we could word it in such a way that if you're feeding feral cats on your property, meaning you've allowed these animals to take refuge and live in your property, and you're feeding those feral cats, in my opinion, that is ownership. The animal's now living on your property. You've decided to feed that animal. You certainly should have the responsibility of vaccinating that animal, probably spay and neuter. So I would recommend changing the definition to exclude, just feeding. And my amendment to the second sentence of 115.9 would read something to the effect of, I would insert a small phrase. It would read, regular feeding of feral cats, and I would add, on personal property and by the owner of the legal resident, or by the owner or legal resident of such property, shall constitute ownership with the resultant responsibilities as outlined in this chapter.
So if somebody goes feeding a cat that's on a back of McDonald's, you've now stuck McDonald's, even though they have no control over it.
Well, I would say that the owner of the property would have to be feeding the animal for. So if the wording is wrong, we'll fix the wording. But I want to make sure we differentiate between someone who has decided to keep feral cats on their property, feed those feral cats. They should, because they're on their property, And you could very easily argue that anything on their property is their
The difference
property.
between it's their property or, you know, a church down the street, say.
They have to feed them.
That's what I'm saying. Right.
Well, they'd have to
Feed
be
'em.
both. They'd have to be the owner of the property and feeding the animal.
Okay, is there a second for this motion?
I'll second it because I want to hear more.
Yeah, so-
I'll second it.
I want to differentiate between those who may feed wild animals in the wild and those who feed wild animals on their property. So there is a difference. There is a difference between, because we're going to have, I think we have an issue that we're going to prohibit feeding of this type of animal in the public, but none of the others. Whereas if you're feeding cats on your property, and potentially that's where the issue lies. If someone allows or keeps many, many feral cats on their property, the feeding of those cats could exacerbate the issue, could lead to health concerns for not only that homeowner, but for the neighborhood. So I think there's some benefit to having this provision, but I think we should differentiate between those who feed animals and those who feed animals on their property. And
Can I just clarify something? You keep bringing this correlation between feeding birds and feeding other animals, and there should be some way to discern. But the whole point of this is the public health threat of rabies. And birds don't carry rabies. And other animals aren't fed by, we don't have a problem. I mean, this is a problem that is specific to feral cats because there is a correlation with an increase in rabies. So it's not the same thing as feeding any wild animal.
But, well, that may be true in the case of rabies, but wild animals carry diseases. So, you know, if you're going to say that no birds or other animals carry disease, I would argue that the mouse that lives in your house carries disease.
But nobody's feeding mice.
I get it.
And nobody's feeding birds.
But
I mean, rabid birds.
Yes, and,
Yes.
and I would even add, I think in support of Elaine's point, that it's not just the rabies, it's the interface. The feral cat colony has a combination of increased likelihood of rabies and that very strong interface. So in my opinion, it's distinct from the other animals that we have in Radnor that people might feed.
So, just to clarify my amendment, it would, regarding feeding of feral cats on personal property and by the owner or legal resident of that property, would constitute ownership. Again, the point here is that in the whole history of the township, we've never worried about feral cats until we had an issue at one property where many feral cats were living. That's when the issue became an issue.
John, are you working from the official draft that the manager circulated to the Board of Commissioners, or are you working from your your draft, which goes into much more detail than what you've so far talked about? You're only talking about so far amending 115.9, but the draft you circulated has a number of other changes. Where are we on that?
Yeah, I'm recommending amendments to the official draft. I recognize that the draft that I presented to the board is for discussion purposes. I would love to see many of those additions get, those edits be done.
Are you wound up?
Yeah, but that's my amendment.
Okay, do we have
If I
other
don't
comments
support
on
this-
just that amendment, which is to limit it to owners feeding feral cats regularly on their own property? Any other comments on that?
Well,
Please.
I would like to ask the indulgence of the chair to allow the public to speak at this point.
On the general?
Well, on this, generally, and also on John's particular approach. I was contacted this morning by residents in my ward who were very concerned about the fact that this ordinance even got in front of us on our agenda without much notice. In particular, without 4 commissioners putting it on the agenda. And I explained to them that we put things on the agenda through a process involving the manager and the chair of the board, and that nothing gets passed after it's put on the agenda until there's full, robust debate and introduction and at one meeting and then passage at a second meeting. I have not, that's point number one. I have not really heard from my constituents who are in the audience tonight on what their concerns are about the ordinance. I will say this, though. I come at this problem a little bit differently than the Board of Health did. What I'd like to see us do in response to another constituent that has been after me for quite a while, not after me, but importuning me and asking that I help on a domestic cat that continually strays, goes on her property, and attacks birds, and gets in her house, does messes on her lawn, and so forth and so on. So what she has asked me to do, and what I'm going to do once we get to the point in the discussion where another amendment is appropriate, is to ask the board to consider an amendment to require no domestic cat to be allowed to leave its property unless it is under the control of the owner. Now, it's basically a feline leash law. And so that's where I come at it. And as I said, the rationale behind that is that these domestic cats create problems, and they attack our songbirds, and that's not a good thing. They also can, as Don Curley said, can get into contact with, I think you were saying this, with the feral cats. Feral cats are more inclined to carry rabies, and one of the domestic cats that might not be vaccinated, maybe is vaccinated, could be attacked or bitten by a feral cat and end up, we have to go through the whole process that's in our ordinance now to quarantine it. Lastly, I spent about 2 hours today on this ordinance, and I don't know who the author, well, and what I found out at the very end is that we're only amending a very, very small portion of this ordinance. It's what John Fisher pointed out. I think, what is it, 115.9? And I spent all this time and found all sorts of problems in our existing code. And I put them in an email to the chair. We have, well, I won't go into it, but because I think it's for discussion another time. But I think that, therefore, that we need to look at possibly fixing the problems in our current ordinance, as well as addressing the needs of the Board of Health under this ordinance and my amendment to control domesticated cats.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you to hold your thought about proposing another amendment until we deal with the one that's on the floor. And I think it's a good idea at this point, before we address that amendment and the underlying motion, to get some public comment. Is there any other staff comment before we open up to?
Well, I just wanted to add, towards the thought that this was sprung on people and surprised people, if you remember correctly, this ordinance was actually introduced quite a while ago, and we chose to table it. And then I worked with Board of Health. We talked about it at least 2 Board of Health meetings. Commissioner Schaefer worked with the chair of Board of Health to come up with this final version. That was discussed last week at the Board of Health meeting. So if someone's surprised, it's because they weren't paying attention. I think, and we've noticed this properly, and we've met our obligations. I mean, this has been going on for 2 years.
Well, I wouldn't scold anybody this way, John. I would just say that there's no damage to anybody's interests at this point. It's on the agenda. It may not even get more than 2 votes at this point. I don't know. So there's been no harm to anybody's interests that wants to see no change in our existing ordinance. So I'll kick it back to you then.
Okay. I'm going to open it up to public comment now. Anyone who would like to comment, please come on up, introduce yourself, tell us where your address and where you're from. And
my name is Joanne Fredericks, and I live in Windsor Avenue in Wayne, and I've lived in the community for over 30 years. And I thank you for the opportunity to present my views. Before I get started on formal comments that I have here, I just want to say that I have 4 feral cats that live in my house. And one of the requirements is that a vaccinated animal must have a collar on at all times. Now, I don't know if any of you have cats. A normal cat may be hard to keep a collar on. A feral cat, to get the collar on him and have him keep it on is almost impossible. So I would suggest that you look at that requirement as well. But in my view, Chapter 115 makes it a crime to feed a homeless animal. Commissioner Fisher went through all the steps, but it boils down to you're a criminal if you feed a homeless animal. But I believe that the Board of Health is extremely misguided in thinking that feral cats will disappear if the cats are not fed. Cats are territorial, and they're going to stick around in the territory that they're familiar with. They won't starve either if that's the hope. The cats will find alternate sources of food. If not provided by people, the cats will dine on birds, mice, voles, rabbits. Anybody that's concerned about the cats killing birds, you're going to have even a bigger concern if their people are not feeding them. We all agree with the objective to reduce the homeless cat population, but it will never be achieved under this type of ordinance. Cats will continue to thrive, and the population will grow despite this ordinance. There are individuals in this township that spend their time feeding homeless cats. Yes, there are, and there are some back there. They also use their own time and funds, as Commissioner Fisher pointed out, to catch the animals, vaccinate them, neuter them, and return them to the outdoors. This ordinance criminalizes that behavior. These people aren't the criminals. They're the ones who abandon the cats that are the true criminals. This ordinance was introduced over a year ago, and Commissioner Fisher said that, and there were comments made that there were a lot of changes made. When I read the ordinances, with the exception of the licensing of the cats, there was very little change made. And I believe that, Commissioner Fisher, you had had discussions with some people about adapting the ordinance to include trap, neuter, and return, which is a viable solution. But this ordinance doesn't really incorporate any of those. Trap, neuter, and return has been used successfully to reduce the feline population in many municipalities throughout the country, including Los Angeles, New York, San Diego, Washington, D.C., Chicago, and Fairfax County, Virginia, to name a few. And here's a quote from the director of the shelter at Fairfax County Animal Shelter. Trap, neuter, and return works. It is a humane solution, and we are thrilled that in such a short period of time, the TNR program is showing significant results in Fairfax County. With the help of citizen trappers, we are able to spay or neuter these cats before they contribute to our community's homeless cat population. TNR is saving lives in Fairfax County. We all want a solution to homelessness and the growth of the feral population, a humane solution. However, it doesn't appear that the township, and you commented on this, Commissioner Schaefer, is going to adopt trap, neuter, and return at this point, but chooses to criminalize the selfless act of feeding a homeless animal. Mahatma Gandhi said that the greatness of a society and its moral progress can be judged by the way it treats its animals. I ask you to think about it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Joe Siciliano. I live on Aegis Avenue in Rosemont. I'd like to thank the commissioners for their service and providing the opportunity for us to address them tonight. And I appreciate the revisions that were talked about this evening to the ordinance as it was posted earlier. But if the revisions to Chapter 115 as it was previously dealing with feeding feral cats were passed, it would, within 2 months, turn me into a criminal because I feed feral cats in my yard, cats that have been through a trap, neuter, release process where they've been vaccinated against rabies, checked for diseases, and they're routinely monitored and they're under control. I guess they would be my cats then, but they're no more dangerous than In fact, they're less dangerous than feral cats would be without a managed program that were just fed. I'd be in good company, though, being a criminal, because the ordinance would also criminalize a segment of the population that routinely performs acts which would no longer be considered admirable and humane. Radnor is fortunate it doesn't have a feral cat problem, in part due to the countless nameless residents who perform a service to the township and community without recognition or compensation. And they're the feral cat caregivers, people who practice, manage, trap, neuter, return of feral and stray cats. Trap, neuter, return addresses the feral cat population, while this ordinance, as it stood, does not. Trap, neuter, return is the process whereby feral and stray cats are humanely trapped, taken to a veterinarian where they're neutered or sterilized, vaccinated for rabies, and checked for other diseases. If the cat is free of disease, they're returned to the area where they were trapped and remain under the managed care of individuals who would be criminalized under this ordinance and who regularly feed them. The caregivers freely give their time and energy and resources, so there is no feral cat problem in Radnor. Time, energy, and resources which would otherwise be a drain on the township, and the Radnor Township Police Department, which, as mentioned earlier, responded to 1,752 calls during the month of March. Regulating police officers to chase down stray cats and investigate who is feeding them is a waste of their time and valuable service. And while not specifically using the word feeding ban, the ordinance is in fact just that. It makes it illegal to regularly feed a stray or feral cat in the township. A township seeking to starve feral and stray cats, and it ignores how they came to be in the first place. Feral cats just don't appear because somebody leaves food out for them. They appear when irresponsible or uninformed people abandon their pet cats. And that's the real crime that should be addressed, not starving cats after they are discarded.
The ordinance doesn't ban feeding. It doesn't.
It makes it illegal, though.
No, it doesn't.
Can we get some, because I wouldn't think that it would. So my sense is that if you take ownership of it, you get the cat vaccinated, that there's nothing in this ordinance that would prevent you from doing that. Is that correct? John, is that your interpretation also? Yeah. So I'm not sure I agree with your statement that this criminalizes
so far we've
behavior that you
heard
said.
it's a total misconception. This change to the ordinance is not to eliminate feral cats. That's the way it started 2 or 3 years ago.
Yes.
That is, and Don and I were the primary ones who fought against that.
I very much agree that the previous version to this would have done what you said, but I don't believe this version
But what we've
does.
done now is we're addressing the public health issue of rabies. And if TNR groups that are voluntarily doing this have that cat vaccinated, it's a feral cat, and someone feeds it, there's no law being broken. The cat is vaccinated.
There are some conditions that are impossible to meet.
And also, collars are in the current ordinance. That's not a change
Let's let
being
this
proposed.
gentleman finish his comments, okay?
Well, it's just,
Yes,
it's
we didn't mean
misrepresenting what
to
we're
be
doing.
adversarial with you. We just wanted to
You don't have to debate it. Just make
Go ahead.
Okay,
You
well,
go ahead
what I
and
was
finish
saying
your
is that
comments.
there's conditions
Can
that
I
make
clarify?
it impossible to meet. Having a feral cat or, a cat that's been through a TNR program wear a collar with a tag on it is impossible. There's no way to ensure that a feral cat would maintain that collar. It's just
we can,
unattainable.
but we can address that. I mean, we're not. I don't know if you want to address that now. Yes, it doesn't mean that it can't change it, but nowadays you can get a chip for $25, right? So, no, a chip doesn't require annual maintenance.
Again, let's let this gentleman finish his comments,
The
okay?
one I got off the
Trying to
website says
Okay.
that it must wear an approved tag.
That's actually the law now. We're not adding that. That's already the law. So,
Okay, but I'm saying that's really difficult.
But the ordinance doesn't differentiate between domestic cats wearing a collar and feral cats wearing a collar. And I think that's what everyone's trying to make a point of here, is that, as I understand it, it's virtually impossible to keep a collar on a feral cat. So if you're going to require vaccination of feral cats, which we can do, but as proof of vaccination of feral cats, you have a collar, which we can't do necessarily. There's an inconsistency with the code.
And perhaps one easy solution is chip or collar. I mean, I don't know if we want to bring that up tonight, debate it tonight, but we can investigate that over.
That language would make sense, considering that a chip is an option of a homeowner.
right.
Right. Or even when feral cats are initially caught and vaccinated, would be an opportunity to
Yes, that's what I mean. You
implant
put
a
the chip in
them.
then, and it's good for life, as I understand it.
Yes. Yeah, and you could,
Joe, can you just mention how they identify cats that have been spayed,
Microchip?
neutered, and vaccinated? No, they do ear tipping.
oh, yes, there's an ear tip. They ear tip the left ears.
Right. And there,
cut the
there
tip
is
off.
no provision in our code to use ear tipping as a means of identification.
Right, but
There needs to be,
that
possibly.
would make it easier. But, I mean, that's why I was saying it was a feeding ban, because you couldn't meet the provisions in here. So ultimately, you wouldn't be able to do it. And finally, the feral cat population, I think, is best controlled at its source, and making it a crime to release pet cats into the wild would acknowledge that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your
Thank
comments.
you very much.
Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Melanie Shane, and I am a 40-year or so resident of Radnor. I'm currently the president of the board at Francisville, and I catch feral cats. In the last several years, the multiple versions of this ordinance has brought the issue of feral cats and their health and well-being into the spotlight. A lot of this was commented on by Commissioner Fisher. It's provided an opportunity for many people in the community that are assisting feral cats to get to know each other. It's been a good thing, because before that, we didn't know each other. It's helped us help the feral cat population in this community. It's helped us educate the township's government. It's helped us prove that there is humanely a way to reduce the numbers and maintain the health of the feral cats. And that's what we've been talking about in trapping, neutering, and releasing. Sometimes you hear people say return. This focus has given those of us that have cared for these feral cats and those of us who live in Radnor an opportunity to perhaps very loosely organize ourselves so that we can assist each other. Until then, until all this focus was brought, none of us were really fully aware about all of the great things that were going on in this community being conducted by the citizens for the health of these cats. There's a large group of individuals who've been taking responsibility and taking care of these cats. And if you look around this evening, you'll see some of those individuals here tonight. And we're not the people you think we might be. We're attorneys, we're doctors, we're investment managers, we're teachers, we're housewives, we're business owners, we're artists, we're homeowners, we're taxpayers, we're voters, and we're community leaders. And we are the people who have for years in this community trapped, neutered, and released. We've vaccinated, we've maintained the health of these cats. This was done a long time before the term TNR was even coined. And TNR is not a new concept, but it's been successfully practiced without the township's help in Radnor for many years. It's been accomplished by the individuals paying for the trapping, the neutering, the releasing, the vaccinating, the food. And probably it's amounted to tens of thousands of dollars over the years. And no one's complaining and no one's asking for any help. Not 1 cent has been paid by Radnor Township. We're getting this job done humanely at no cost to the taxpayers. And in following on the earlier conversation, should these caregivers be criminalized? I'd say they're the unsung heroes of the township. There are people that have cared for these animals 365 days a year. They've not gotten a thank you from the township, and they're not asking for one now. But what we are asking is that legislation not be passed that's going to create a problem that we really don't have. We're asking that this not be managed by the township, the trap, neutering, and releasing. And I think you mentioned earlier the funds are not there to do it anyway. Feral animals are experiencing their feral plight because of the irresponsibility of Radnor residents who abandon these animals, abandon them before they were spayed or neutered. And feeding bans are discouraging feeding, however you want to couch it. It's rarely effective, it's inhumane, and it's impossible to enforce. And it doesn't prevent feline procreation. Most townships are facing hard economic times, and Radnor Township is certainly not immune to that. I think that you would find that trying to enforce the ordinance the way it's currently written would exceed any revenues that might be gained from it. Our police resources would be better spent dealing with the increasing crime rates that we have in the township. So in summary, I guess I'm urging you to maintain the status quo because it's not broken. And lastly, I have to, in this day and world, you've got to find some humor and something to keep you going sometime. I would just say thank goodness that these cats are eating out, but they're not requiring a parking place. So, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Could I ask you, and Joanne also, did you express your views, did you express your opinions to our Board of Health when it had under consideration
Oh, yes, we
this
did.
ordinance? You did?
We did.
And what kind of reaction did you receive?
Well, I guess that's why we're here today.
Okay. While you're still up there, maybe I could ask my fellow commissioners, would you be averse to having a program, a mandatory program of trap, neuter, and release so that a person could not feed a feral cat unless and until she had a license under a TNR program?
I don't think we're up to that administratively. I think the private groups do a very fine job of it themselves. And I don't want to get our local municipal government intertwined in the job that the private groups do. And in my view, this ordinance does not ban, it does not preclude, it works fine with a robust TNR community who runs their own programs. I hear the comment about the collar, and I think we could address that with, a chip or a tag and put that in language. But in my view, incorporating that into our administration and the mechanisms and enforcing it and running it, I don't see that happening.
How do you feel
wait,
about it,
Elaine?
having to get a license to feed a feral cat first by assuming the responsibility of being part of a TNR program?
Well, I think that's adding a management level that's not needed. The process that's working now is working very well. There are a number of very responsible individuals. Rarely do you find, I've never found, anyone that is involved in assisting feral cats who doesn't follow through, once you've trapped that cat, who doesn't follow through with making sure that they are spayed, neutered, vaccinated, and maintained.
Can you give me an idea of what your personal practice is? Do you have new feral cats coming all the time to your property, or you just have the old standbys that are there and you're feeding them, or what? And have you trapped, neutered, and released them?
Yes, and it's not always at my property. There may be someone that calls that they have an issue with a cat around their apartment building. They may have an issue with a cat around a restaurant, and they're seeking some assistance. And we use have-a-heart traps. We bait the trap, set it out. Hopefully we catch that cat that night or whatever night it takes, pick it up the next morning. We use the spade club, and we take the cats there, and they do an excellent job of keeping them overnight, spaying, neutering, vaccinating. If they also test for leukemia and feline AIDS, and if the cat has one of those, the cat would be euthanized, not put back out into the wild. Then we keep the cat until they're healthy enough to be released.
Okay, thank you so much for your comments tonight. Is there anyone?
Can I publicize your assistance in any manner? Ma'am, excuse me. I mean, this is the first I've heard of what you do tonight, and I've lived in Radnor for, I don't know, 20-something years. I mean, do you actually publicize that service that you provide? Trapping them?
Is it publicized? No, but it's word of mouth.
I want to speak to
There's a
that.
problem. I know that from time to time I've been in conversation with Larry when he has a health issue in the township to either give him some advice on how to deal with the animal, or actually, I haven't personally, but some of the others in our network have gone and actually trapped a number of cats where Larry was having issues with them at apartment buildings.
Okay, thank you so much. Did we have, Baron, did you have a comment?
Hi, Baron Gemmer, South Wayne Avenue. I'll be brief and try not to pile on too much. Commissioner Higgins' question about what was said before the Board of Health, and part of the problem with the Board of Health is not only the 5 o'clock meeting, but also without agendas being published ahead of time, it's hard to know when they're talking about something. I will relate to even as early as 2009 when some of the quote-unquote cat roundups were being done. I tried to present some TNR studies there, and I did not feel that they were met with very good reception, and that's, I think the discussion was the genesis of this wasn't so TNR friendly or almost anti-TNR, the earlier versions of it. Not to pile on again the states, but 330 local governments either allow or endorse TNR, and I understand what I'm hearing here. I don't, even though it may not be illegal, I don't consider the current language to be TNR friendly because it's fraught with some confusion and some difficulties. The collars were mentioned, particularly with cats. You wanted to use breakaway collars so they don't hurt themselves, and with a feral cat, that's just going to come off sooner or later. So there obviously has to be something else. But by not differentiating, you're going to run into problems down the line. Commissioner Higgins suggested a leash law, which whether or not you would entertain that, but again, that's not going to work in the feral cat world. So the suggestion would be to differentiate between feral cats and domestic cats, not to the extent necessarily of licensing them, but so that that these ambiguities and these confusions and overlaps don't come into play for the folks that are trying to take care of them. The other thing that right now, even if you change the definition of ownership or leave it that way, if multiple people are feeling the cats, do multiple people own the cats? So who's responsible then if it does one of these things that are listed in here? So that's one of the problems you run into by not giving a clear line between domestic and feral cats. So that's my comment. I appreciate all the comments of the constituents there and Commissioner Fisher's early on comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Baron. Is there any other public comment? Okay, so let's go ahead and tackle this amendment by amendment. There is an amendment on the floor that was put forth by Commissioner Fisher and seconded by Don Curley that was suggesting that we exclude or change the feeding language to encompass feeding and ownership. I'm going to go ahead and call the vote on that amendment.
Mind if I'm sorry, but if we come this far, we might as well, one more. If we were to add language to that, to your amendment, John, that you can only feed cats on your own property, then would that satisfy you? Okay, would it satisfy your concern? And John, you're shaking your head. That would be
No, again, Don, we're confusing two issues, both of which are very important. I am totally sympathetic to the issue of feral cats and TNR. This thing we're talking about tonight is not about that. This is about rabies. This is about vaccinations. That's why, and we keep crossing the issues. I would love for Radnor, if not to have a TNR program, to at least endorse the concept and lay down some guidelines so these groups would then have at least the aegis of some authority to do it, even if we're not paying for it. That's not what these changes are about. I mean, we're mixing two entirely different topics. They have a crossroads, a nexus here, I agree, but we're not trying to control feral cats. That's not what this is about.
Okay, I'm going to call the vote.
Most of these things are in the current ordinance.
I'm willing to, so I may have a simple solution to this. I just reread it and I thought, the conflict exists in 15-9 in that second sentence. Why we're trying to redefine, this is interesting just in terms of legislation. We have a definition of what owner is in the beginning, and yet we're redefining owner again in 15-9, and that makes no sense to me. So my amendment as it is now will be this. Strike the second sentence in 115-9. Just strike the second sentence. So we get rid of the regular feeding of feral cat constitutes ownership, because we already defined ownership up front. So let's strike that.
But John, the definition of 15-9 is actually duplicative of the definition,
Yes,
and doesn't say anything different.
And I will work back to the definition now. So strike, again, good law means your definitions are up front, and you don't attempt to redefine or restate what ownership is later in the document. You can refer to ownership, but you don't restate what it is. So let's strike the second sentence. And this, I think some of the lawyers in the room may agree with me on that. Second, in the owner definition, I want to strike one word and change it. I want to change one word. The only one word I want to change is the word or, and I want to change it to and. And here's how it would read. Owner includes any person having right of property in any animal, and any person who keeps, harbors, and regularly feeds an animal. Okay, so instead of or, make it and. So any person who keeps, harbors, and regularly feeds an animal or has it in its care. Because this is what we're talking about. We're talking about people that have the animal in their care. They have the means and ability to trap. They have the means and ability to feed. They have the means and ability to spay, neuter. We're talking about a homeowner who has taken on all the responsibility, has trapped the animal, has spayed, neuter, and released, has adopted the best practice. What I heard tonight were a lot of best practices that this township doesn't publicize in any way. This ordinance is a way to kind of drive that point home. So if you're going to be one who wants to start keeping feral cats, you are there on your property, you are there for the owner of that feral cat. And I think that kind of gets rid of the ambiguity. I think it makes it better code because we're not restating what an owner is. And I think it kind of would work for me. It works
But then,
for me.
John, you need to strike or allows it to remain on or about any premises, right? Which is in the current ordinance.
Well, I don't know if that makes it
all we added
incompatible.
to this definition was
Yeah.
feeds.
I realize, see, we're talking about things that you guys, the minor changes that have been made since the original draft, and I think another issue here, Commissioner Higgins, I'm not going to speak for him, but he has indicated there may be other issues with the ordinance as it's written. And if we're going to introduce and subsequently pass this ordinance, we want to clean up those other issues. So I'm finding inconsistency because in the beginning, you have a definition of owner, and then later, 115.9, you try to redefine what that owner is. And all I'm saying is strike that second sentence in 115.9, discourage the feeding of feral cats, which is a great thing to do. That's a good best practice. You're not making it illegal. You're saying.
But John, I don't First of all, I don't express an opinion on this tonight. I may vote to introduce it, but I think it needs a lot of changes. I like the idea of a chip to identify these cats, but I don't think, if taking Elaine's position on this, if you strike the second sentence in 115.9, you've basically gutted the concept of having a penalty attached to feeding feral cats, and you don't cure the problem by taking out the word "or" and putting "and" in under owner.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call the vote at this point. And we all have our own opinions on this, and none of us are any more right than the others. All those in favor, this is the amendment, your amendment, as you just
John, are you going
stated
to
it.
split your amendment? Because I'd be inclined to.
Okay, well, we can vote.
Delete the second sentence, but I think "or" has to stay and not "and."
Well,
What is your amendment?
let's split, I'll restate my amendment as deleting the second sentence in 115.9.
Okay, all those in favor.
Well, we need a second on that.
Well, that's what you
Okay.
originally proposed and Don seconded.
So this is. The only amendment I'm asking for now is deleting the second sentence in 115-9.
Okay, all those in favor of that amendment, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay.
Nay.
It fails 5-2. Well, 2-5, I guess, with the only one supporting Commissioner Fisher and who else supported? And Kevin Higgins. Okay, next we had an amendment proposed. Did you want to propose an amendment?
Yes, I would like the board to insert a new section, probably close to 115.11 in the current code. And by the way, when I said earlier that there are serious problems with the existing ordinance, if you take a look at 115.11, the Director of Community Development shall immediately issue a notice informing the public when a case of rabies has been confirmed in Radnor Township or any contiguous municipality, and emphasizing the prohibition against domestic cats and dogs from running at large in the Township of Radnor. Well, there you have a reference to a prohibition against cats running without control or accompaniment by their owners, and such a prohibition does not exist in our code. So there's an error there in that drafting. But in any event, I would like to move that we amend the ordinance that's before us to include a requirement to impose on any owner of a feline in the township to accompany that animal when it leaves the property, and either have it under tied to a leash or held in a carriage of some sort.
Okay. Is there a second for that motion? Okay, that motion fails for a second, for lack of a second. Now we have the, is there any other amendment? That
Well, I think we should go ahead and amend 115.11 and strike the
Well,
prohibition
that
against
is the type, we can go through and do those non-substantive changes without.
Well,
I'll do. I have them all ready.
oh, so we'll
He
do
has a
those.
list,
So
right.
we're going to introduce an ordinance, then we'll make the amendments with reintroduce it.
Depends
It has
on
to be
whether they're-
Depends on
only
if they're
if they're
substantive or not.
substantive.
I'm sorry, just that one cat against domestic cats, that's a
Well,
substantive
it's
enough.
clearly not, it's not meant to include cats.
Right, so
Right.
we will need to reintroduce. Okay, I'm just trying to save you.
I think that's not substantive, since it's clearly not.
The solicitor
first of all,
may want to opine on that.
The section you're talking about, Jim's in the existing ordinance. It was just
already
relocated.
in the law.
And what that is about, I was in the Board of Health meetings when we discussed that. It's not whenever there's a case of rabies. It's at the discretion of the health officer to determine if there's an outbreak of rabies, and then to advise the public to keep their cats and dogs inside. That's what that is about.
It needs to be worded better.
I don't disagree.
I'll give you another example.
We could take any ordinance in our code book.
Yeah.
Jim,
and
I'm
these
going to
work.
move us along, okay? There was another amendment that was bandied about adding the language to include not only the collar, a requirement for a collar, but the option of using a requirement for a chip or a tag. Would anybody like to?
Other means of positive
Cliff.
identification, I'll make that
Ear
motion.
tipping is a method.
Well, it just, why limit it?
So
There
would
might
somebody
something
like to
better will
move to
come along.
amend to include those methods of identification
Other
along with the
methods
collar?
of positive identification, I'll make that.
And I'll second Commissioner Nagel's motion.
I mean, there are some places they tattoo them.
And where will that be?
That is in the section requiring vaccination under 115.2. One 115.2A.
Yes.
So in addition to wears a collar with da-da-da, or some other form of identification, positive identification. Okay. That's been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That amendment passes 7-0. And now, finally, we have gotten to the underlying introduction with that one amendment that survived. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? That
Well-
passes 6-1 with
And-
Commissioner Fisher opposing.
And as I said, I vote for the introduction. That doesn't mean it will pass at our next meeting or that I will vote for it to pass, because I have a lot more to learn about the problem before I'm ready to say yes to this.
Okay. All right, and for those who are listening or who are here tonight, this will come up again in 3 weeks. So if you have input that you'd like to give between then and now, please either send it to our staff or to any of the commissioners or to all of the commissioners. And I also would like to say, along the lines that were discussed or bandied about before, about introducing some sort of an organized TNR program that would coexist with this ordinance. I think that's something that we would like to consider. Okay, thank you. Let's move along. Next, we move to Finance and Audit with Commissioner Kevin Higgins leading us.
First item on the agenda is the acceptance and approval of the disbursements identified as 213-4A and 213-4B, a grand total of $1,947,656.68, which are all within the budget limits as approved by the Board of Commissioners. So I make my motion to approve.
Second?
Any commissioner comment? Any staff comment? Any public comment? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 7-0.
Next item on the agenda is the authorization to advertise for a series of bonds associated with our swap termination to refund the 2004 general obligation bonds that are underlying that. So I need any more detailed explanation, Bill?
No, I'd just add that what we're doing here is a little bit more transparent than what the Unit Debt Act provides or requires. We followed this same roadmap last year when we refunded the bonds. So all we're doing here is noticing to the public that we're going to advertise for the issuance of the refunding bonds, and they'll be at the May 13th meeting.
There's a calendar of events in the explanation which is available to the public. Is that correct, Bill?
That is correct, in the legislative summary. And that tentative schedule is still pretty good. The one thing I would add to it, if I have the opportunity, is if you'll recall back in 2004, these bonds were issued in conjunction with monies borrowed on behalf of the Wayne Arts Center and the Radnor Library, Memorial Library. With regard to the Wayne Arts Center, there's the opportunity for them to participate and achieve some savings on their piece of this. So we've reached out to the Arts Center. They're interested. So in terms of these series of events, on May 13th, there'll also be a what is termed a TEFRA hearing, T-E-F-R-A, which the township did in 2004 as well. It's an IRS regulation due to an IRS requirement because we are borrowing money on behalf of a 501c3. We're currently going through the diligence with the Arts Center now to get the necessary paperwork put together. as part of the issuance. But if they participate, their savings amount in a cash basis is about $87,000 over the life of the bond, so over 20 years. But so it's a good opportunity for them as well.
Thank you. So I make a motion to authorize the advertisement.
Second.
Any commissioner comment? Any staff comment or public comment? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 7-0.
Next item on the agenda is Resolution 2013-61, appointing Flam Walton, PC, as the Act 511 solicitor. Our current solicitor's law firm, I guess, is disbanding, and she is moving over to be associated with this new firm. So this is the new firm, but it's the same principles involved with the management of the process. So I make a motion to approve this resolution.
Second.
Is there anything you want to add, Bill?
The only thing I would add is that the fee structure under this resolution is identical to the one we currently have, so the same fees.
Any commissioner comment on this? Any staff comment? Any public comment? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 7-0. Next, we move on to Parks and Recreation. Do you have anything, Commissioner Nagel?
Just wanted to mention to everyone that tomorrow night at Friends of Radnor Trails Park at 6 o'clock is the Arbor Day celebration, tree planting and whatnot. Everyone's invited to come out and attend. And then just a follow-up, we've all traded some messages, but the event yesterday, the Wheels of Wayne, was a phenomenal success. I was a judge for the cars. And no, Jim, I wouldn't give you an award, sorry.
I
But
would have, Jim, if I was a judge.
he didn't put the $20 bill into the wiper blade. But I talked to a lot of the owners, and they were as excited about it as we were. And what you heard as you were walking around all day was people calling friends, telling them to come over. I mean, it was a booming success, and hopefully something we can look forward to next year also.
Great, thank you. Public Safety, Commissioner Spengler, do you have anything?
A report.
Library, Commissioner Jim Higgins?
No report.
Public Health, Commissioner Nagel?
No, nothing additional.
Okay, any old business?
I just have one item, and Bob Zinkowski is here. Okay. I noticed in the financial report that Bill White had provided us, and it reminded me that we had put money in the budget for the Conestoga Road spillway, and we had received a $10,000 grant from Greg Vitale's office to do something there. But, you know, there's a lot of work that needs to get done there. And since that time, you know, PECO has come through with this transmission project. They've installed new poles, and they've spent a lot of money. And hopefully they're going to remove all the old equipment. Otherwise, we're going to be left with these large steel towers forever. But on that spillway, there is one of those large steel towers, and I thought this might be a good chance that if and when they're removing that tower, that we somehow get involved in doing something to beautify that landscape. Because I don't know how many you take Conestoga Road, but about 13,000 cars per day traverse past this weed hill, and it's not a very nice way to be welcome to the township. You know, in my opinion, you know, you're coming up that hill, really coming into the heart of, you know, the beginning of the township, so to speak.
No.
And, well, I know. The beginning of the township is Yang Ming.
You've been here for a while.
Yeah, I know. But you understand what I'm saying. So you have a lot of people coming down Conestoga Road. You come up around the bend, and all of a sudden you see sometimes the weeds are 10 feet tall. It's ridiculous. There's no landscaping. There's nothing.
What intersection is that?
This is just the hill leading up to the Rosemont Business Campus.
Oh.
Yep. And, you know, so anyway, I'm bringing it up because we have $10,000 from Vitale's office, a grant. I thought we had put some money in the budget. I don't know what's in the budget. PECO's on site doing a whole bunch of work. Maybe this is a good time. I'm going to ask Bob to reach out to PECO to see if they want to look at this issue and see what they want to contribute. And maybe we can get something done there. SEPTA, I think, technically owns that space. There's an easement for PECO on it. So you have a case where you have all these or quasi-judicial groups and government entities owning something, never wanting to spend any money on it. And if you think in terms of the township, we have an ordinance against your grass getting over 6 inches or 12 inches tall, yet here's a piece of property that someone owns, and we can't force them to cut the grass
John,
on
we've
it.
been talking about this for 20 years. Why don't we just go in and, we got $10,000, why don't we plant just 6 or 7 trees there?
That
You know?
that would be great.
You know, that's
Yeah.
what we ought to work on, you know, just take a little space and put 6
Yeah.
or 7 trees and try and maintain that space, rather than try and get the whole thing done because nobody wants to do that.
Well, I agree. We should do something, and instead of do nothing. And we've done nothing, and no one's at
Aren't
fault.
you going to
And
lose the grant?
we are going to lose the
Well, they
grant June
extended
15th. So we have about a month and a half to buy the trees and maybe have them installed by someone else, you know, to do something.
$1,000 a piece, you can get a nice big tree, nice 10 big
We
trees.
get really nice trees. We could, you know, I see trees, you know, wholesale installed for a lot less, so a few $100.
Madam President, the only concern that I would have is when SEPTA comes by and they spray their non-selective herbicide, those trees will be gone within an hour or two when they spray that, and they do that usually on an annual basis. One of the things Steve Norsini and I have spoken about is with the amount of disruption that SEPTA and PICO has done in that area, is to have them be a partner with the township to be able to put that back together in the appropriate way, because there is still a work site for them. So it's one of the things that definitely has been on our radar, and we think there's an opportunity to work with SEPTA, PICO, and with the township with the 10,000 is to make a commitment to, again, our share as part of that. And I think, John, you've probably seen that when they come by with their non-selective herbicide, it's going to kill whatever goes in that area. So I think we're going to have to make sure, however we do that, we stay out of that spray zone that they do. And it's a tough area, especially with stormwater management of how it runs down there. But I believe we've done there have been some preliminary designs, I think. I'll make sure I check with Steve to see if that wasn't, to get those over to you. But I think
we had some designs, but it was, it made sense in the sense that if you're going to plant anything there, you have to demarcate it so they will not, in fact, spray weed plant killer on it. I won't use the trade name, but the point is they really do. They spray the entire area and kill everything in its path. And then I get complaints from everyone saying, well, it used to be green and now it's all brown, and it looks like someone sprayed chemicals all over it. So it's a lose-lose right now. We really need to do something, and I feel like because Pico's there, it's a good time to reach out to them and try to bring them in on this, maybe contact Ralph Brown or whoever our contact is.
You know, I think it's good, and I think I know Commissioner Nagel worked with Steve and worked with SEPTA, and the project there with the parking lot, I mean, really came out very, very well, very, very nice. And again, that was a cooperative venture with them. But I think here with this item, because of the amount of construction that has been done in that area, I'm sure there's some restoration work, but that's one that I know is definitely on our radar to make sure we partner with them when they're completely done to be able to do this work.
Okay, so the only thing I'm asking for is that staff does everything in their power not to lose the $10,000 grant and maybe that's buying the materials that will eventually get put down, whatever that is, and whatever we can do. I would appreciate it because
we'll make sure we do that.
Yeah, I mean, there's virtually no more money left from the state, so we get our last $10,000.
We can do that.
Okay. Any other old business? Any new business? Any public participation? All right. Would someone like to move to
Move
adjourn?
adjourn.
Second.
All right. Good night.